Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Conversation is a skill, part 1. Hello, amazing people, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. I appreciate you joining me today. I had a recent conversation, and it dawned on me that a lot of people don't know how to have conversations, especially if it is a newer relationship. It is a new introduction. We find ourselves in these situations where we're oftentimes ill-prepared for how the conversation is flowing and the direction it ends up going down. Maybe it's not how we intended. Maybe it's not something that's even beneficial to either party. You just kind of get stuck in this loop of not knowing how to navigate this conversation. And I realized that this is a skill. Like, conversation is an actual skill. There are certainly people that have, the so-called gift of gab, and they can just talk about anything. But I would also argue that they are not good conversationalists. More often than not, somebody that has that gift of gab, they typically will talk at people instead of talking with people, to where it's a mutually beneficial conversation. And the entire point of conversations should be mutually beneficial. Like, I'm not talking about seminars. I'm not talking about going to a lecture where it is one direction of communication. It's you're there to learn and everything that this presenter is going off. Like, to a degree, this is a lecture. This is a seminar, because you don't have direct opportunity to provide feedback in a conversation with me. However, when we are face to face, when you and I, even in engagement over the comment section and chats, there are things that you can do and skill sets you can learn in order to make that an effective form of communication. And this is something, as with anything communication related, it is absolutely critical that you as the leader gain this skill set. Now, I wanted to create this 2-part series of this podcast to go over that, because there are, several key things that you can do and be aware of and start integrating into your conversations, into your mindset, and how you approach relationships, whether they be employee-boss type relationships with your spouse, with your kids. These are all things that you need to start incorporating in order to up your leadership game. Now, this part 1, we're going to talk about 3 things. On the surface, they may seem very basic, but the reality is they just go right out the window the second we get involved in a conversation and the unknown of what's happening, or even the excitement of what's happening. Maybe it's a conversation with somebody you met at an event, and you're like, holy smokes, I'm in love with this person. That could easily happen. But there are things, even in those types of conversations, that you need to be aware of. So without further ado, we'll kind of jump right into them. Like I said, there are 3 things we're going to cover. So the first is it's active listening. Most of us, if you have gone through public school or community college or college, you at some point had to take a speech class where you quote unquote learn to give speeches. Take it for what it's worth. I have my own feelings about this kind of thing, but you probably heard this term, active listening, and it's about being a good listener to the person talking. Now, why this is important in the communication as a skill is that active listening means you are paying attention to the speaker. Okay, so as you are communicating back and forth, you're speaking, you're talking, words are coming out of your mouth. As the other person is talking back at you, is talking to you, you are listening to what they're saying. You are not, maybe you're in a restaurant and you're not over here looking at what the waiter or waitress is doing. You're not looking at, the people at the table next to you are doing. You are focused on the person in front of you, because this is the most important conversation that is happening right now. I know I'm certainly talking, everything about this is tilting towards a business sense. If you're at a business lunch or you're at a networking event and you're having a conversation one-on-one with somebody, as you're talking or as they're talking, you're not kind of turning your head around, checking out who's walking by, trying to look for future people you want to talk to, or, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, you're actively listening and focusing on that person you are talking to. You're making eye contact, because that's what conveys the interest. That's what conveys the sense of, okay, this is not a waste of time. The other person is actually interested in me. So what's interesting about this is the first key of communication isn't you talking. The first key is showing the person you're communicating with that you are interested in what they have to say. Okay, so it's a little bit different way to think about it, and understanding that communication isn't necessarily all about you, and it shouldn't be. It should be you trying to encourage some form of information exchange to where both parties benefit. Okay. All right. So the second thing I want to talk about, so active listening, right? That's the groundwork, is understanding you have to stay engaged in the conversation, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and certainly verbally. All right. So open-ended questions. I cannot tell you how many events I have been to, how many, workshops, conferences, networking events, where there are only two questions I ever get asked. Can you guess what the two questions are? You probably can, because they're probably the two questions that would pop into your brain when you're in that type of situation, especially around a new group of people that you're unfamiliar, like a networking event or a conference where there's a whole slew of different backgrounds that come together that aren't necessarily, in the same industry. What are the two questions? Hi. Hey, where are you from? What do you do? Okay. These are open-ended questions, yes, in the sense that it gives them an opportunity. It's a little bit of an icebreaker, but open-ended questions. So yes, where are you from? To a degree, it's open-ended, but it's really not, because you just say, "Oh, I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida. How about you?" Right? So these types of questions are, yes, they're can be great starters of conversation, but if you don't have a plan of, after they give you, "I'm from, Franklin, Tennessee," like after they give you that answer and then it's not a natural roll into something else, like what's your plan after that? Do you have an additional open-ended question? And the importance about the open-ended question is it allows, again, the people that you're talking with to give a more detailed and thoughtful answer. It's not just simply a yes, a no. Hey, are you enjoying the conference so far? Nah. Oh, what brings you down here? How are you using this information? Like, maybe you're at a sales seminar. Like, oh, what have you found most beneficial about this information that we learned this morning in this morning session? How are you going to apply that to your teams when you get back to your workplace? Right? These are the kinds of questions that are open-ended to the degree it allows people to, one, formulate a response that's more than a yes or no. It encourages actual exchange of dialogue, because now you're creating this topic that you can talk about. In this example, like, how are you taking the information you're learning and applying it back to your business or your team, or, however that applies. But it gets away from the simple yes or no, because the simple yes or no questions, if that's all you ever ask, then your conversations are going to be very brief and not at all beneficial to anybody. So I would highly encourage you to open-end it. And then a little side note about this is, if your only go-to questions, especially if you go to a lot of, networking events and conferences and seminars where you're around different people all the time, you need more than these two questions. These are something that I will cover usually on my various social media channels and blogs and things of that nature. So I don't know that I'll do it justifies an entire podcast episode for, like, hey, these are the 10 questions you should have in your arsenal. But you should have an arsenal of questions that you practice and rehearse. Role playing cannot be understated enough to be able to, like, stand in the mirror that morning. Oh, hi, welcome. Nice to see you. Oh, I see you work for such and such company. I really love the mission that they do. Like, maybe you're going to a trade show or something. Like, what are some things that are appropriate for your audience that you find yourself in, that are types of questions you can ask to create that atmosphere of exchange? And it shows that you're interested in people beyond just oh, where are you flying in from? And 100%, I've been guilty of this. You may be listening to this and I've been at an event with you and we've talked, and I've been guilty of this. Because, whether out of ill preparing or not preparing for the event, distraction, whatever it is. But I would highly encourage you as a leader, especially if you're having these conversations in your office with, maybe new people coming in or visitors coming in, guests, potential clients. Like, what is your repertoire of questions that you can ask that are open-ended? They spur additional conversation, and they're not the simple, the standard, where are you from? How do you like the weather? Can I get you some coffee? Whatever that is. Okay. And then the final thing that we're going to talk about in this part one is really understanding social cues. In every sentence, every setting, we are talking with another human being. This could be over the phone. This could be over, Zoom or WebEx or some other, video calling platform. Like what was the FaceTime, and what was the other one that was real popular along with FaceTime before Zoom took over? Anyway, but these social cues. So it's really, social cues is about not only paying attention to the words that are being said, the tone of the words, the attitude of the words, how they are paying attention to you or not, or are they distracted by things happening around? But the social cues are really about paying attention to the body language and the nonverbal communication. So as you're talking to somebody and they, in the middle of you speaking, you see, their eyes drop. You see them take a kind of that deep resignation breath where they're like, holy smokes, I'm stuck in a conversation with this guy because he's rambling on about blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Like, you need to be aware of this. I've talked about this specifically in a previous episode about understanding the social cues people give you when you talk. What is the attitude as you approach them to talk about, hey, we've got this project coming up. You talk to your other department heads or your employees or your staff. Do they turn and pay attention to you? Or do they just kind of, okay, Gary, yep, and they're just sitting there banging away on their keyboard, not paying you attention? Those are social clues. And that's direct feedback of how you need to make changes in the way you communicate. Okay. And we can go into this a lot. I would love to hear your comments about this, but really it's about paying attention. This is about paying attention, especially this part one. Paying attention by being active listeners of the people you're talking to, paying attention by preparing ahead of time with these open-ended questions to spur conversation, and then paying attention to the feedback you're getting directly in the nonverbal communication and the body language as you're talking with people. So I hope that was beneficial. It's a great groundwork. If you get these 3 things down, you will be better than 98.9% of other communicators out there. And you are now ready to take it to the next level. And you will find that your relationships start to change. The results you get out of these networking events will start to change versus just like, holy smokes, that was a colossal waste of time. There's literally no one in there that's worth talking to. Well, maybe it's you that's not worth talking to because you don't know how to communicate. Communication is a skill. Let's learn it together. Let's practice it together. If there's anything I can help you with, please let me know. Likes, comments, subscribes, and shares are fantastic. I look forward to talking to you for part 2 coming up next. No matter where you're at in the world, have a great afternoon. Bye.